There's always a little bit of a delay, a few seconds when I start these live streams. I see that on the replays. So I am going to give you a pretty short presentation today, discuss how likely it is that there will be peace in Ukraine in 2025. Will there be an end to the Russo-Ukrainian War? I do have a second channel focused on geopolitics. There is a link to that down below in the video description. So I go into a lot more detail on that channel. That is the focus. Here on the lifestyle channel, it is obviously important for guys who might be considering to go to Ukraine in spite of this war, the biggest war in Europe since World War II, to understand obviously the geopolitical situation and logistically how to get to Ukraine, how dangerous it is, what is it like on the ground. I'll be giving you a lot of detail on that in this presentation. And also maybe if you're going to come to Poland or the Baltic states, because it may be affected by what's going to happen in the next few months as well. If you're new to this channel, my name is Connor Klein. I help high-level men with living their dream lifestyles in a region that I refer to as New Europe. So that is the part of Europe east of Germany and west of Russia. So we're talking about the three Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. Also help my clients with Moldova. Actually with Kazakhstan, it doesn't really fit in my definition of New Europe, but since I love Kazakhstan, I still bring clients all the way over there. That is Eastern Europe. A little bit of it is still in Europe, it's mainly Central Asia. And also I may be bringing clients to Romania and to Czechia. They're the two countries I'm thinking of at the moment. And I have been living in Ukraine for many years. I speak both Ukrainian and Russian, and I actually have a background in international relations with a focus on this region, including Ukraine. And I used to work as a lawyer at the European institutions, EU institutions. So I can give you a little bit more of an informed perspective on what's happening, not just from the geopolitical point of view, but also lifestyle, since I have lived and continue to spend about half my time in Ukraine. I haven't actually been back for a few months, but that will be rectified very soon. And of course, before the 2022 invasion, I was living in Ukraine. I actually hadn't left Ukraine for over 2 years, a little bit over 2 years. And I'll start, I guess down below there are lots of interesting links. If you're new to the channel, maybe you're not familiar with them. I actually have a guide to traveling to Ukraine, which will obviously be a little bit more the practical side. If you are traveling there, it has a hospitality guide, obviously logistical information, how to stay safe as possible. That is below. There is a link in the description to this live stream. Also a similar guide for Moldova. Don't have to worry, at least for now, about the safety issue, but it has an amazing hospitality guide for Chisinau, all the best cafes, restaurants, nightclubs, cocktail bars, shisha lounges, and about 10 Moldovan vineyards, because Moldova is very famous for wine. So a lot of the guys who are traveling to Ukraine, they elect to fly to Chisinau, the capital of Moldova, and therefore they end up spending a few days in Chisinau as well on their way to Odessa, because it's about 4 to 5 hours by bus from Chisinau to Odessa. So both of those are down below in the description to this live stream. And of course, if you are interested in my in-person experience, used to be called the Zara experience, now when we call it the New Europe experience. This application form down below. I have been here with clients in the Baltic states for the last couple of months. Also have brought a lot of clients to Poland as an alternative, and I am waiting on some new clients to come pretty soon, which is why I'm actually still here in the Baltics. So let me start tonight's presentation with looking back on this day, which is February 23rd, 2022. And by the way, put your comments down below and your questions as I'm speaking to the presentation, or I will come for a Q&A at the end of this presentation. I was in Chernivtsi, which is a city in the west of Ukraine, kind of west central Ukraine, near the border with Romania. I have pre-positioned myself there because, unlike most Ukrainians, to be frank, to remind people who are watching what was going on from abroad, I had anticipated that there was a very high likelihood of an extended Russian invasion, as it turned out to be. At the beginning, we were calling it a full-scale invasion. I think that's probably not the most accurate description of it, but definitely an extended invasion to replace the government in Kyiv, and presumably they were going to annex some of the territory that they would have conquered in their plan, Russia, in addition. And I had understood that the likelihood was very high. I thought the whole idea was a bit mad because I didn't think it would succeed. And so far, 3 years later, that's clearly the case. Russia currently occupies 17% of Ukrainian territory. Ukraine occupies a tiny piece of Russia across the border in the Kursk Oblast, and they already illegally occupied 8% of Ukrainian territory before the 2022 invasion because they invaded in 2014. So they haven't, at this point of war, gained so much more. Obviously, they did occupy parts of Kharkiv, Kherson, and Kyiv, Chernihiv, this kind of northern and eastern and southern part of Ukraine that they were ejected from. But back in February 2021, I had realized that the risk was very high. In December 2021, February 2022, but December 21, I actually made a video from Kharkiv talking about why we had this situation. Basically, Ukraine doesn't want to be in Russia's sphere of influence because the majority of people believe that being in the EU ultimately is going to be better for their quality of life, both economically in terms of the political system, while Russia just doesn't want to accept that it doesn't have a right to control Ukraine's destiny, and Russia is basically a revanchist empire, and it wants part of its former empire back, its colonies in Ukraine. Russia is a land-based empire. Most of it is contiguous, although they do have a small part in Kaliningrad, which is here in the Baltics, which is non-contiguous. So you actually have to come through the EU to get there, to that part of the Russian empire, in effect, because that is the way it behaves. And I was in Chernovtsi, and I was pre-positioned there about 10 days before the invasion. And I remember, since we're talking about February 23rd, Zelensky, last time I think I saw him in a suit was on the 23rd of February, 2022. And he went on the television right around now, because here it's like 5 p.m. in Ukraine as well. And I think it was a little bit, maybe an hour or two later, he went on television and said that he tried to call Putin, and Putin didn't answer the phone. And Putin had made a speech basically outlining, it was basically an unofficial declaration of war speech about a day or two before, where basically he tried to justify what was later to become the 2022 invasion. So at that point, I was like, we just went from, I thought it was a 50-50 up until Putin's speech. And I was thinking, well, we're looking at about 80% probability. And then when Zelensky went on the TV, I was like, we're looking at about 95% probability that they're going to invade now, and it's going to be very soon. So I remember I got a call from a friend who was living in Brazil, one I know for many years. And he said, yeah, they're really going to do it. And I said, it looks that way. It looks almost certain. And yeah, maybe tomorrow I'm going to have to leave here, but I am very close to the border. So Chernovtsi, I think it's about 40 minutes by car to the border. So the next, at around 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, I'm forgetting, I think it was at 4 a.m. The first salvos in the shelling of Ukraine began, first attacks. And yeah, I think I went to bed only at maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I woke up again at 5 to phone calls about what was going on. And yeah, then I made a few videos in Chernovtsi that day. It was interesting to be there. There were guys who I'd seen the day before in civilian clothing, guys my age who were Ukrainian. I'm 46, so they would have been, well, I was 43 at the time. And so guys who looked like they were in the mid-40s, who the day before had been in the cafe with me, dressed in civilian clothes, who were now wearing military uniforms. Same guys having their breakfast. And yeah, we were in a state of war. I think it took, I don't think that the martial law was actually signed until the evening by Zelensky. So actually, even Ukrainian men, there were no restrictions. They could actually have left on that first day. So I think the restrictions came into force by the early morning on the 25th of February, 2022. So I actually made some videos and then didn't leave that day. I remember, maybe it's because I'd already paid for my Airbnb, but I was not very panic-stricken or anything about leaving. I was 40 minutes from the border. I felt, yeah, I can get out. It's very depressing, the situation that we have this full-scale war. I had premonitions of a large number of people dying, and the consensus in all media, I think, at that point, whether it was pro-Russian media, independent media, or we'll say mainstream media or pro-Western media, was that Ukraine had no hope of surviving the Russian onslaught and it would be overrun. The only question was really how many days could Ukraine hold out? And that first day, everything was working. I had been told before by someone with a lot of experience in the military that I really would need to leave because Russia would successfully take out water, electricity, payment systems, the internet, the phone service. So there wouldn't be much point in staying, especially from a YouTube point of view. I thought, okay, I had actually been thinking maybe even going to Kyiv originally, weighing up the pros and cons. But then I thought, well, if they take out all of this infrastructure, what am I going to be doing? I won't be able to communicate with you guys and show you what's going on anyways. And I could get trapped very easily. My biggest fear was actually getting trapped in a city. I had been in Mariupol maybe about, I thought actually I was in Zaporizhia just 2 weeks before the invasion, but Mariupol had been a few months before, and I thought about going back, but then I was particularly wary of getting trapped in a city that might be surrounded. I didn't rate my chances very high as a new citizen in those circumstances. As a guy of military age, I wouldn't want to get detained in those circumstances in a war zone. So I wasn't too worried about getting out. I took a day to consider everything, and then on the 25th of February 2022, I evacuated with Angela. We left together and we went to Romania, went to Bucharest for a month, and then a friend actually gave me his apartment in Budapest because he was away in Brazil. Guy's actually been in my videos a few times. We're hopefully going to meet up again and film together next couple of months for this channel. And then I spent 2 months in Ireland, went home to Ireland for 2 months. It was Angela's first time being in Ireland, so it was, I guess, the upshot. Got to see how it works with Ukrainian refugees there, also in Romania at the time, in Hungary, and then we actually came back to Ukraine, to Odessa, moved back actually already by June 2022. I had actually gone already in April 2022 back to Ukraine. We crossed the border from Hungary to Zakarpatski Oblast or Subcarpathian Oblast, which is in the very west. So we went to cities like Mukechevo. I think that was the one city we went 2 or 3 times because we wanted to be back on Ukrainian soil. It was easier to send stuff from Ukraine rather than sending from outside. And helped deliver many things for the humanitarian effort, also for the military effort at the time. And that was the kind of my story. I was already back in Ukraine, and then obviously you have the rest of the content that's been on my channel. How did I feel leaving? I remember I made a vlog at the time. And I was just pretty depressed by the situation. I wasn't scared for my own safety because I was evacuating and was at the border. We were actually fortunate to get out so quickly. It would have been actually better to have left on the 24th because on the 25th, when they introduced martial law, it got very hard at the border to evacuate at times. If you were a guy and, Ukrainian men couldn't leave between 18 and 60, but even foreign men leaving, a lot of them got stranded for 3 days and not being able to get out the border. It was a bit of a scandal that maybe at some point in the future after this war is concluded, we will get more information about what was really going on. I have a few theories about why it was so hard to get across the border. And fast forward now 3 years, we are on the cusp of the 3rd anniversary. And actually tomorrow is Estonian Independence Day. So kind of an unusual overlap. I guess they invaded on Estonian Independence Day, then Russia. I don't know if that was just coincidence or not. I guess so. You had to pick one day. It was 1 in 365 chance that it would be Estonian Independence Day. So we're going to celebrate that tomorrow. I will probably wear my Vyshyvanka today. I just decided to put on a Slava Ukraini t-shirt in a few different languages for you. And as I alluded to, no one gave Ukraine much of a chance. I think I realized that all these predictions of doom and gloom were unfounded. Maybe it was I think it was day 21 of the invasion. And I thought, I must be mad because I'm not seeing this Russian invasion reaching its goal and taking over Kyiv. They had, if you remember, the convoy outside of Kyiv that was extremely long. I don't know if it was quite 100 kilometers long, but it was very long. And that just looked like a massive target to me. And I'm not in the military, and I'm not, obviously have a background in international relations, so I understand more from the political and strategic level, but it just looked like that doesn't look really good if you're stuck for a week outside a city. I mean, you need supplies, you need food. It's cold as the middle of winter. And as it turned out, it was a catastrophe for Russia. Eventually, they had to retreat from that area strategically. And I think on day 28, I made a video saying that, I think I made the title at the time something like Ukraine has won, because at the time the definition of Ukrainian victory for just about everybody, and I think including the government, if I remember correctly, was to survive, actually not be overrun. So they won in that sense at the time with that definition of victory, and Russia had lost. But I changed the title since Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has redefined what victory would be, and that meant actually taking back all of occupied Ukrainian territory, including that was occupied by Russia illegally since 2014 when they invaded Crimea and they invaded parts of the Donbass region. So that, at the moment, we're at an impasse. Russia occupies around 18%. They gained in the last year less than 1%. I think it's like 0.7% of Ukrainian territory additionally. So maybe there were 17 in the beginning, maybe it's just about up to 18% at the moment. And Ukraine gained a tiny sliver of Russian territory in the Kursk Oblast. It's like down to, I think it's around 500 square kilometers, or is it even less at this point, that they currently control, but they have a tiny piece there as well that they can use as a bargaining chip for now if they do end up in negotiations. And then obviously other people realized that, Russia hasn't overrun Ukraine. So that was 3 years ago. And the strategy by Russia, I have the Geopolitics channel where I go into a lot more detail. You can subscribe to that, go check it out if you're really interested in going into more detail. But this is a lifestyle channel, so I'm going to get into the prospects for peace, because maybe people are considering, who are watching this, about returning to Ukraine. At the moment, I do have some consulting clients who go back, and they normally are married or engaged to Ukrainian women or have a girlfriend from Ukraine, and they are looking at buying property and getting residency in Ukraine. But that's obviously a small cohort of guys. I have other clients I had one client come with me to where I met in Lviv, and he actually was helping with the military effort to a certain extent, actually connected with Estonia. And I also meet lots of people, and some of my clients, some of the viewers on this channel, help with the humanitarian effort in Ukraine, because especially closer to the front lines, like cities like Kherson is pretty horrific. You basically have daily Russian war crimes where they fly over and drop rockets on civilians and from drones and stuff like that. Horrific scenes. There's an interesting documentary video on YouTube by an Irish-British guy called, his name is Caelan Robertson. Worth checking out. If I remember, I'll look for it and link it down below if you're watching the replay. But normally I forget these things after, so just type in Caelan, spelled Caolan, Robertson. Kherson, which is spelled Kherson in Ukraine, in southern Ukraine. City I documented a lot on my channel the previous year. In fact, so really tragic. A lot of my favorite places near to Odessa were there. The yacht club, and one of probably my favorite vineyard in Ukraine is just across from Novokhovka Dam. So, not that it exists anymore. Unfortunately, I think the building is still there, but they're not producing much wine in these circumstances. It's like literally the length of the river away. So, should fast forward to what has been happening over the last year. It's been more or less an impasse. Ukraine's strategy is basically to wear down Russia and hope that economically that Russia suffers enough that they cannot continue the war at this intensity, at least. And that involves targeting Russia's energy infrastructure in terms of what they export. So you see a lot of the oil refineries been targeted, and just wearing them down on the battlefield. And Russian losses are greater than Ukrainian losses. That's pretty normal in warfare, where you have a defending side and an attacking side. So mainly Russia has been on the offensive during this war. So they have multiple losses are multiples of Ukraine. We don't know the exact figures. You can speculate. I saw actually BBC had tried to go and look at the obituaries of Russian service members, and they said it's almost getting to 100,000 where they actually find the proof of the obituary of someone who was serving in the military died in Ukraine. So that is the absolute low watermark. Plus, they had other people who are not officially serving in the Russian military, like either people in the previously occupied territories, so in Luhansk and Donetsk, who voluntarily joined militias or were conscripted into the military because they introduced conscription there about a week before the invasion. I think it's even up to 65, not even 60 in those occupied territories. So it's going to be a minimum of around 150,000 dead on the Russian side. Normally, the ratio between dead to wounded is 1 to 3. So that would mean there's 450,000 wounded people who fought on the side of Russia. Could also be people come from other countries. And but Russia, it seems like they have a worse ratio of dead to injured. So possibly it's only 1 to 2. That you're more likely to die if you're on the Russian side for a variety of reasons, like lack of medical care and their tactics that they use when they're fighting. So that would mean it's maybe around 450,000, 500,000 casualties in this war. Some of the estimates go up to 750,000, but it's going to be at a minimum around there. Ukraine, very hard to know. It could even be up to 100,000 dead at this point, but most estimates have it a little bit below that. And yeah, it's about 1 to 4, 1 to 5 in terms of the ratio of dead to wounded. So it would make it maybe around, let me think, that's going to make it around, somewhere probably around 400,000 casualties. So Russia's are more, but it's probably not 3 to 1 higher. But in any case, it's the casualties, and if we include civilian deaths and serious injuries, it's going to be over 1 million people, who've either been killed or seriously wounded in this war. And then obviously we have the refugees. I'm not really sure people who left at the time, I don't know, was I also a refugee? I was also leaving Ukraine at the time with Angela. And, I don't really think that's a great categorization 3 years later to say they're really refugees, because I think they're going to be basically allowed to stay in the European Union. And now Ukraine itself is on the path that's to EU membership as a candidate country. So that's where we are. And basically, Russia has been waiting to see if Donald Trump would be elected president of the United States. They were hoping for a change of strategy that would be more favorable to Russia. And on that particular gamble, Vladimir Putin has been proved, it seems, very correct so far. We have seen not just a change in U.S. policy towards Ukraine, but actually it's hard to know if we can still refer to the collective West anymore, because he doesn't seem to be allied with not just Ukraine, but with Europe in general. Wouldn't classify the US as an adversary at the moment, but they don't appear to be allied with Europe, the European Union, the United Kingdom, or with Ukraine. Actually, maybe not even with Canada. We've seen them constantly referred to, including Donald Trump, that Canada should become the 51st state, that they will. This more expansionist rhetoric also about Greenland, which is part of the Federation of in Denmark, and also Panama Canal, threatening to invade, basically refusing to take military options off the table. So in some shape or form invade Panama, perhaps also with Mexico, very hostile rhetoric, also putting on tariffs and then taking them off within a day and threatening them against the European Union. And then we had that culminated about a week ago with J.D. Vance giving a speech at the Munich Security Conference, which is normally where the unity of the West is emphasized in security matters. So like NATO, which is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has an Article 5 protection. So attack on one is an attack on all in principle, and the only country who's ever invoked that is the United States after 9/11, and the other countries came to U.S.'s support in varying ways. And basically, he attacked his former allies, I would say at that point. It seemed to indicate a rupture, and complained about, in part, that parties that are pro-Kremlin and anti-EU and anti-Western are not allowed to campaign the way he wants. And then he went and met with the AfD. There's elections in Germany today, which is a pro-Kremlin party. So basically, it wasn't very clear which side is he on. And then Donald Trump, this has escalated over the last week with the minerals, the argument about the minerals deal with Ukraine, which was originally Zelensky's idea, it seems, since he didn't believe that Donald Trump, or he seemed to calculate Donald Trump probably wouldn't supply more military aid, as that's what he campaigned on before becoming US president again. And basically, he was trying to structure a deal that give Donald Trump an incentive to back Ukraine militarily, give rights to minerals, in particular ones that are currently under Russian occupation, that territory, and say, well, if you arm us to liberate this territory, then we give you lots of the rights to the minerals there, to make it like a big incentive to back support. And we were even optimistic that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump would actually work out better than Joe Biden was for Ukraine, because Joe Biden didn't seem to want to see Ukraine lose, but also didn't want to see Ukraine win, and didn't actually send that much aid. He liked to kind of exaggerate to a certain extent how much he was actually helping Ukraine at the time. So that's why we were in an impasse. And maybe Donald Trump, because of the attraction getting America in their hands and additional mineral resources, might actually persuade him to back Ukraine. But now we've seen it degenerate into a bit of a social media shouting match between Zelensky and Trump, and along with Elon Musk, who's, for not at the very beginning of the invasion, but some point afterwards, just became pro-Kremlin and pushes a huge amount of Russian talking points and the Russian position. There were threats to cut off Starlink, which now seem to have dissipated since Poland stepped in and said that they were going to cover it in their contract with Starlink, and then Musk seemed to back down and say, oh, I was never threatening to cut it off. But basically implying that Zelensky should be replaced as president, there need to be elections, all these talking points. So basically at this point, it is a wider problem than just for Ukraine, the transatlantic relationship, because countries here like the three Baltic states and Poland have to be considering whether the US is really their ally anymore as well, if they are going to send aid. I mean, basically, ultimately, so far, the US has sent primarily military aid to Ukraine. And if you count everything together, the financial aid and military aid, it's like, we'll just round it up to 100 billion. But most of that money is military aid, and most of the what goes into calculating that figure is actually the replacement cost. It's not actually the value of what the US has been sending. It's the value of paying to replace it, the stocks, which is basically upgrading the US military capacity and supplying jobs to US workers. So in reality, they haven't sent even 100 billion or even close to it. Maybe 50 billion would be a better accounting figure, but 50, 100 is not really so important, but it's definitely not the 500 billion that Donald Trump has been ranting and raving about all week. Out of nowhere, he seems to have gotten this number, or he thought that there were 500 billion that he could blackmail out of Ukraine with this deal. And going forward, is Ukraine, if military aid is cut off because they don't want to basically be extorted by the US, will they be able to fight on? That is the big question. And I have maintained that even over a year ago, it was maybe not quite a year ago, I made a live stream where I said that even if that aid package that was held up in the Congress hadn't come through, that Ukraine would resist and would ultimately win. But we could be looking at a time scale that's going to be many, many years. And obviously the probability that goes down quite considerably, and Russia has an even bigger chance of eventually prevailing. But I just still think that would be the case. So that's obviously we got more weapons since in Ukraine. So I still believe that's the case. So we don't know what's going to happen at the moment. U.S. is still sending that military aid that was approved during the presidency of Joe Biden. It hasn't been cut off. The humanitarian and financial aid has been cut off because it was handled by USAID, which is interesting that Musk just blocked it all without auditing it, amongst everything else that's been going on in the U.S. So this is the big shift geopolitically that has happened in the last 10 days, more or less. And at the moment, the U.S. seems to be negotiating in a rush, giving up most of the bargaining chips that would be on the Ukrainian side, trying to negotiate without Ukraine and impose it, a bit like what Donald Trump did with the Taliban. He negotiated with Taliban without the Kabul government and then signed a horrendous peace deal that obviously Biden stuck to and then botched the entire evacuation. But it's the same setup, right? Donald Trump never paid the political price for that terrible deal, and apparently his book Art of the Deal was ghostwritten anyways. And I don't see the chapters when I skimmed it about giving up so much before you enter the negotiation. So it looks to me like basically it is an agreement that he's trying to negotiate that would favor Russia over Ukraine, and quite curious considering that formally they were allied with Europe and Ukraine, obviously, to have such a sea change in perspective. And that is where we are at. So to answer the question, will we see peace? We may see a ceasefire. Now, the conditions at the moment for having a ceasefire are that Ukraine would have to agree to hold an election. That's been a Russian talking point. That just looks to me like they want to either stall everything until there's an election, because that would take months to organize after a ceasefire. There's definitely not going to be an election at the moment. Under martial law in Ukraine, you can't even hold one. And it doesn't seem like there's any political will, even from the opposition in Ukraine, to Zelensky to hold one. And then there would be an election. And presumably the other reason, other than being disruptive to Ukraine, is that maybe Russia would plot to try to install a pro-Russian candidate. I can't see how they would legit in a free and fair election get a pro-Russian candidate elected after this war. It just seems impossible. But maybe Russia, maybe even US has ideas. Maybe they want someone else in instead of Zelensky. They've become so hostile to him, in particular because he won't just sign over the country's wealth and be extorted so easily. And this will have long-term, just as a slight side point, this will have huge long-term implications for the US's reputation and for the US economy, because US can no longer be trusted. Like, they gave aid and now they want to be reimbursed for it. Well, why would anyone accept aid from them in the future? Hey, is this free? Or in 3 months you're going to start sending us bills for, $500 billion when it's only worth about 50 to 100 billion. Things like the Starlink, is any country that going to use it for military purposes or national defense purposes going to buy something like that? No, they're going to buy it from someone else, or they're going to develop it, at least anyone sensible, or they're going to develop it themselves. Are countries going to buy military equipment from the US? Well, it wouldn't be wise to buy anything that can be cut off remotely, or that the US coming back trying to extort them would create some sort of defense weakness. So again, European countries will now probably start to produce a lot domestically. So we'll lose those kind of economies of scale, which at the moment, US gives a security guarantee under NATO, but then Europeans buy most of their military equipment from the US instead of developing their own arms industry or developing it out a lot more. And that kind of worked out well for both sides. US also had access to military bases in Europe. And ultimately, the European countries, whilst not investing as much into their own self-defense, were basically the bit that they were buying from the US. So it's kind of hard to know if that, were they really subsidizing it or not, the US, the European defense. It's kind of a neat arrangement that cost everybody less money, basically. But that's not going to be the case. Poland's already between 4% and 5% of GDP spent on defense, and other countries are going to now ramp that up, going to produce their own arms. They won't be buying as much from the US as they would have. And things like Starlink, we're going to have to develop our own alternatives to it because it's no longer can be relied on. That's changed the geopolitical landscape also for countries in Asia like South Korea. Do you want to depend on the US now? Doesn't seem to be a great idea. Japan and the European Union, do they need to balance the US? If the US is actually really in an alliance, a bizarre alliance with Russia going forward, or neutral, then maybe they need to balance an increasingly hostile US with China. Canada will need to balance, maybe become a lot friendlier with Europe and China. Same with Mexico. So we're going to have huge ramifications to this that I think are even if they got a new US president tomorrow with a different tone or a change of policy, I don't think it's repairable. I think it's already gone too far. So with this setup, we may end up with a ceasefire in spite of it not being particularly attractive for Ukraine at the moment on the terms that seem to be being negotiated by the US. But there is maybe a 50-50, I would think, that we will see a ceasefire sometime this year. Budanov, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, the SBU, also has that opinion that some point in the year we'll have a ceasefire. And the chances of a long-term peace, I would put, looking at things right now, close to zero. The underlying causes for the war have not changed at all. They've actually, with all the killing that's gone on, it's actually harder to find a long-term peace agreement than it would have been back in 2022. The bottom line is what I described, the underlying cause is what I described in 2021. Ukraine does not want to be in the sphere of influence of Russia because Russia is not very attractive to hang out with. That's what Ukraine basically did for the first 20 years of its independence, and it ended up poor, quality of life being very bad, and opportunities being very low. And yeah, it's not very attractive to be with Russia. Russia has the size of economy of Italy. Its GDP per capita is, at this stage, I was going to say a fraction, but it's like half of here in the Baltics or Poland. And that's what Ukrainians want. They want to be wealthier. They want to have more rights. They want to have more opportunities. And Russia, just as a model, doesn't provide that. Russia, on the other hand, still has this imperialist attitude. It doesn't accept the Ukrainians can have independence. And I think that's something more or less broadly held within Russian society. It's not just Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin is basically, we have an adage in international relations that war is the continuation of politics by other means. He can't achieve his aims politically, and he's determined to try and achieve them politically or militarily, or he was. But now maybe he's trying to achieve a lot of it politically as well, via Donald Trump as a conduit to achieve those aims, which are to prevent Ukrainian independence from Russia. And so I see Ukrainians are willing to accept it. They haven't been defeated militarily. And Russia is not willing to accept that Ukraine has a right to real independence from Moscow, and they have not also been defeated militarily. So that is the state of play. If there is a ceasefire, it will simply be for both sides to rearm and get ready for the next round of fighting. That is the way I see things. The underlying problems haven't been solved. Maybe that's all Trump cares about, is just getting a ceasefire, and then he'll declare that he solved the problem. We have peace in our time. He'll wave his white little piece of paper, and just like 1938 Neville Chamberlain, and then we'll see a war very soon afterwards. And there is a potential for the war to spread as a result, because those Russian troops, if there is a ceasefire, they could move them somewhere else and intimidate or attack another country. It could be here in the Baltic states, it could be Poland, and maybe test whether the US is willing to come to their aid, prove that NATO is finished. Article 5 doesn't matter. The US may even withdraw its troops that are pre-positioned here in this region. Or Russia may attack somewhere else with those troops. May go to Kazakhstan, may go to the Caucasus. So we don't know. So that's the way I see it. If you are thinking of returning to Ukraine this year, I would see it as a 50-50, that's just a ceasefire, but it will not be a long-term peace, in my opinion. And yeah, I'm seeing it only as a 50-50. Maybe I'm even seeing it as less than 50-50. I think Budanov pushed me with his comments to think it's 50-50. But I don't even think we're going to get to that. I think the way that Donald Trump is trying to negotiate, by basically shouting a lot. There was an expression, I'm trying to think which US president was, Roosevelt said that you should speak softly and carry a big stick, whilst Donald Trump is basically shouting and shrieking and carrying a small stick at the end of the day. He doesn't have that much leverage. Ukraine, backed up by its European allies, and especially those the assets that are currently frozen in EU financial institutions, are seized and given to Ukraine for its defense. It can walk away from the table with the US, and the US seems to have given up so many bargaining chips with Russia. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they have much leverage over Russia either. So yeah, I'm even skeptical we'll get to a ceasefire. It could happen, maybe less. Maybe revise and say it's like 30 to 40% likely in 2025, but long-term peace agreement will be a long way off. And the alternative would be for the US to, as a lot of us had hoped only a few weeks ago at least, that the US would just back Ukraine to win militarily. Well, ultimately would be more likely to be precipitated by a sudden, maybe not complete collapse of the Russian economy, but really they would have an economic crisis. Inflation is already super high in Russia. It could go to hyperinflation this year if it continues like that. They may have to mobilize a large number of men, and they are running out of material, refurbishing those Soviet-era stocks. So they have a lot of problems in Russia, but Putin calculated correctly, it seems, that by just waiting until Trump was in power, that the situation would change, turn in his favor. And right now, it seems that was the correct calculation. It's hard to know, is MAGA actually more pro-Russian under Vladimir Putin than pro-European? And all the insults that have been thrown at Zelensky by leading members of the MAGA movement, either it's Trump or Musk or someone else, very distasteful, pretty vile. And it makes you question which side they're really on. And I don't think that represents all of Americans. It doesn't represent most people. I think even voted for Donald Trump. I think most people, can look at some polling data, I guess, and see why they actually voted for him. But it was more about the economy and domestic politics. I don't think foreign policy played a big role in people choosing to vote for him or not. So, that's the situation we're in. I will be going back to Ukraine if you decide to go. You will have to be aware of curfew, which is in every part of Ukraine except for Zaporizhzhia, Zakarpatskaya Oblast in the very west. I have a vlog back on the channel from a few months ago when I was there, and I celebrated my birthday there. That is the only part of Ukraine with no curfew, although there is no big city. Uzhhorod is the biggest city. It's about 100,000 people on the border with Slovakia. It's also got a border not too far from the border with Hungary. And obviously you have a huge risk of Russian rocket attacks, drone attacks, some sort of ordnance, even if you were far from the front line. This morning actually, and last night was the biggest drone attack by Russia on Ukraine since the beginning of the war. If anyone thinks, like Donald Trump is saying, that Putin wants peace, it's like, well, Donald Trump has been lying about a lot of things. He can't be that misinformed to think that Zelensky has an approved rating of 4%, for example, which he made up, or that Zelensky is a dictator. He's just making stuff up and desperate. He just looks desperate to get something signed so he can claim he brought peace, but it won't be. It almost certainly won't be any sort of long-term peace. And what else you need to be aware of? Everything's about to do when there is an attack. You need to make an assessment about whether to go air shelter or not. Otherwise, and you can cross the border. For people still write me 3 years, can we go, as an American, can I go to Ukraine? You have visa-free 90 days for every 180 in Ukraine. And that's all. You just need your passport, basically. Passport to be valid, and you're good to go. You can cross the border. You can stay for 90 days without a visa, every 180. And your cards will work. Well, they should work, and they should work for everybody in principle. Electricity, there are times when there are power outages, when Russia in particular strikes the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. However, most cafes, restaurants, they have generators, so it'll go out for a minute and then it'll be back on again. So if you're trying to work, you need uninterrupted access to the internet, then it can be a bit tricky. But if you're fine with not having the internet for a minute, maybe if you're traveling somewhere, suddenly the internet over the phone network is not the best, not like it was before the invasion, then you should be fine. Restaurants open. Basically there are more restaurants than even before, I would say. Very few places that I actually regularly went to closed down. There's one of my favorite place to get shakshuka in the morning, Kyiv, closed. But other than that, everywhere else I think I went to in Kyiv or Odessa or Lviv, they're all open and there are lots of new places. So, it is remarkable that you can go to Ukraine. And if you do decide to go, I would encourage you, obviously, to document it. Just put on your social media, promote Ukraine and the resistance to Russian aggression. This is the biggest war in Europe since World War II. And even better if you're helping the Ukrainian military with the defense or humanitarian effort for the people there. But failing that, if you're just spending money and putting it into local economy and documenting and promoting the Ukrainian cause as they resist this attempt to snuff out their independence from Moscow, then that would be great. And anything else to say? Not really much. Sometimes because I comment on the Ukrainian bride business, occasionally people ask me, like, what is the ratio of all the women? Because they throw out, some of them, this like myth that all the men in Ukraine are dead, the women are desperate. That is not the case. In 2022, women and children could leave, and older men So there was actually a dearth of Ukrainian women in Ukraine. There was a huge gender imbalance towards men, especially single men versus single women. That has actually come back into sync, I would say, at least when you're out socially, just even number, and it's not noticeable. So that's all kind of normal, but I wouldn't say that. You have to think if women left and lived in Europe for a while and then came back to Ukraine, they're probably not looking to leave again in the current situation, most of them, and they're probably not looking to meet a foreigner romantically. They might be open to it, but yeah, maybe that's the last thing I comment on before I go to your own comments and questions. I would have said that just in general, your status of being a Western European from an allied country, we'll say, whether you could also be South Korea and Japan, they're pretty much allied with Ukraine, but from the UK, if you're from the US, you're from Germany or France, your status, obviously in this time of war, with that being an allied country, pretty high. Obviously, if you're Russian or Belarusian, it's not going to be particularly good. Being Hungarian, Slovak, well, maybe not the same, since their leaders have been leaning towards helping Moscow rather than Kyiv in this war. And for other countries, maybe it's a bit ambiguous. But I wonder what is going to be the reaction to Americans. I guess they're going to be bewildered, Ukrainians, and say, like, why is your president against us all of a sudden? And I guess nearly all the Americans who go to Ukraine this time are actually going to be pro-Ukrainian, right? They're not going to be MAGA in general. MAGA in the sense that not everybody, they may have, I even know guys who are pro-Ukrainian voted for Trump in the belief that he would end up helping Ukraine, who are so dismayed and so outraged and so angry. One of them is even part of the Ukrainian territorial defense because they feel betrayed by Donald Trump and what he's doing at the moment. So I think the assumption would be, if you're American, that unless you're going to be openly pro-Trump and MAGA and pro-Russia, well, that's a little bit crazy if you're going to go to Ukraine. But maybe you're going to be somewhere like in Poland. You have a lot of these MAGA guys hanging out there. When I say MAGA in this sense, I mean MAGA, like pro-Russian MAGA, right? So they're anti-European, they're anti-Kyiv, they're anti-Zelensky, they're pro-Putin, that type. Yeah, I think your status, not just in Ukraine, but probably here in the Baltics, Poland, it's going to be very low. There was one of my clients, he always sends me this YouTuber who lives in Poland, who's Asian American, and he was saying how proud he was of Donald Trump. I was like, man, you should see the comments under that video. There's like, I don't know if it's hundreds of comments like criticizing him and saying basically, you're not really welcome in Poland if that's your attitude at the moment, if you think throwing Ukraine on the bus is going to be great. But he didn't say that explicitly in the video. But he was saying how great it is that U.S. is more or less a bully and against its allies, which for me, it doesn't seem to really be reading the room too well there. But anyways, that's another topic. But for lifestyle, yeah, I think being pro-Russian and American, which is basically what MAGA has devolved into, it seems in the last week or two, not going to make you particularly popular in this part of Europe, and maybe all of Europe, going forward. So that's something to think about if you were one of those guys hanging out in Warsaw, like a lot of them do. Maybe not the spot for you. Just an idea. At least you won't be getting on too well with most of the locals. You don't share their values. Anyways, let me go to the comments. I did think I would make that a bit shorter. I also wanted to watch the rugby match. Ireland won yesterday. It's the only sport I really watch nowadays, the Six Nations and stuff. And but again, I always talk a little bit longer than expected. I hope that's of value to you. So once again, lots of links down below. Geopolitics channel. I'm making close to a video a day at the moment. I may even expand that as I start to gain a little bit of traction. This new channel I started last summer that I had kind of not made a lot of content with for at times. But there's a link to that down below. Obviously, if you're going to Ukraine, you have my guide, or Moldova. What else? Consulting link down below. And yeah, if you are interested in person experience, living your best life here in this region, then down below is the application form. You should even fill that out anyways, even if you're not sure if you qualify, because I actually give a special offer to those who I don't think are a good fit. So it's in your interest to fill out an application form down below. And actually, I will have a new community that I'm going to launch. I actually have the live stream to promote it already up on the schedule there. It'll be an inner circle. I will develop it out, maybe develop all the materials for it probably this week even. And I'm not sure when I launch it, but just letting you know in advance that there will be this new community. I kind of teased it a little bit with having Connor's Clubhouse last year, but this will be a two-tiered, at least my current plans have a two-tiered community. So let me look at your comments. So be on my mailing list for that. There's should be a link down below to join the free mailing list there. You get notified of it. Okay, Don says hello. Hey, Don. You've been a long-term subscriber this year, years and years. So good to see you back. I know you're in Los Angeles. Josh says, do I ever come to Prague? I haven't been in Prague in a while. It is one of the other cities that I want to go and document and promote. Obviously, I've been here in the Baltic states for the last few months and in Poland. But Prague in Czechia is the other city, I think, in the region I'd be most keen to go and promote. But I feel I'm already kind of stretched a bit thin. I'm planning to go back to Kazakhstan. And I have clients coming, it looks like, here in Tallinn, also in Vilnius, also in Riga, and possibly to Chisinau and to Odessa. That'll be a little bit closer to summer. So when do I go to Prague? I need to document. I actually thought maybe documenting Gdansk in Poland might make more sense, since I have this Baltic theme and it's on the Baltic Sea. But I'll see what clients, if you're interested in going to Prague, or if you're interested in going to somewhere like Gdansk, which would be a new city for me to document. I've been to both before many times, but maybe fill out an application form or write me an email at connorklein@zarexperience.com, or my alternative email as I kind of phase out a little bit the Zara Experience branding and make it less and less visible. Connor@connorklein.com is also going to get your email to me as an alternative address. But anyways, all that information down below in the description to this live stream, so go and take a look. Someone deleted their comment there. Okay. Choice or four. You thought about going to what was the belly of the beast, to Kyiv immediately after the invasion. Your cook bananas. No, that was just on the lead up to the invasion. I considered going to Kyiv, and I thought, would I be able to document the invasion for you? But then I thought that they would shut off all the water, electricity, internet, everything. So I thought it'd be pointless being there. But in the end, they weren't able to do that in large scale. Even now, 3 years later, they still haven't been able to achieve that. So maybe I would have rethought about it, but I was particularly wary of getting stuck in the city and surrounded. So yeah, that in the end, I evacuated and then came back. So Damien writes, Donald Trump seems determined to end the war soon, so I think he will likely end. Yeah, the war is not going to end. The underlying reasons are there. We had Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, where it seems both sides calculated they would benefit from some sort of ceasefire, and the Ukrainians were proved to be more correct, Poroshenko, the president at the time in Ukraine, than Putin, because Ukraine was able to build its army better than it had been before. And then when Russia launched an invasion on Kyiv, they were able to resist, which probably wouldn't have been the case if Putin had pushed to Kyiv in 2015. So would Putin take the same calculation? Putin wants to be absolutely certain that he's won if he's going to agree to a peace agreement. But basically, that's a capitulation he wants. Because why else would he stop? And he's absolutely determined. The only thing he can stop would be military defeat or economic collapse at home, political collapse at home. Otherwise, he's going to push on. You don't see much resistance from Russians. They've lost enormous amounts of money and their international reputation. And so many of them have died or been injured in this war. And there is not much pushback, so why would he stop? So I think we may have a ceasefire. I said I think it's 30 to 40% imminent this year, but it won't be an end to the fighting, unfortunately. But, from Ukraine's point of view, Ukraine wants to win, and reassert its independence. Could end up like Finland, where it loses 15% of its territory and then survives as an independent state and flourishes, unlike the parts that Russia conquered or the Soviet Union at the time from Finland, with the Winter War and then the continuation war, and then post-World War II, they basically went back to where the territory, the borders, more or less the borders that the Soviet Union had gained, the territory they gained with the Winter War, even though the Winter War is also a train wreck for the Soviet Union, a bit like this war in Ukraine for Russia. Choice or four, you would think that there are a lot of single women over there, but the majority of women that have any interest whatsoever in leaving have already left, meaning that it's not the same as pre-war dating. Yeah. So since it's a huge lifestyle channel and most of my viewership is single men, yeah, that's the thing. Most single women would have left. Looking at the stats in Ireland, like married versus unmarried men, and if they lived for a few years in Western Europe and then came back, I mean, Yeah, I know these marriage agencies, they have the green card girls, right? So the girls that just still dream of going to America. Normally it's like women over 40 who go to those genuinely. Yeah, maybe they just have no options back home and they really want, maybe they normally have, they're a single mom, father's not in the picture, and it's better for the kid to grow up in North America. So their business overall, not 100%, but overall is basically women who want to immigrate to North America, who then marry guys, presumably, or date guys who have very few options in North America and are willing to take normally a single mom and look after the kid. I mean, not saying that's a bad thing in itself, but let's be frank about it. It's not what most men of options don't want that. And yeah, then you got the issue when they get there, because then the chances that they monkey branch are very, very high. So they get there, the guy has very few options. That's why he went to the marriage agency. And her value on the dating market is going to be so much higher in the US than it's going to be in Ukraine, where she comes from, because on average, Ukrainians are, us guys, we look, first of all, at visuals. It's not the only thing we look at, obviously, but we're more visually based than women are. Women look a lot more at status than men do. On average, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but just if you have hypergamy as a cross-cultural phenomenon, which is the tendency of women to date across and up in socioeconomic hierarchies. And yeah, she's going to realize pretty soon that her value versus his value is very different once they're in the US. So problem is when she gets a green card, yeah, you're kind of superfluous to the requirements. So I don't recommend that. And I think now that the United for Ukraine program is actually canceled, or it's suspended, sorry, by the Trump administration. So it's kind of ironic, like most of the clients, my impression is most of the clients of the marriage agency business they voted for Trump. Like they might all not be this MAGA, pro-Russian MAGA, although it seems like when Joe has these live streams that the people he brings on are all watching Russian propaganda all the time. So they're hardcore pro-Russian MAGA. So it's kind of weird that they would even want to. That's the thing. They think they're getting a traditional wife. That myth, in my opinion. And but she's Ukrainian. Like, how can you be pro-Russian and think you're going to marry a Ukrainian? It must have almost no chance of working out in the long term. Small chance, but very low probability. But now the United for Ukraine program is suspended because Trump suspended it. So most of these guys who are going to this, they voted to reduce their options of having a Ukrainian move to live with them in the US. And the Canadian program is already canceled for a while, but a lot of Ukrainians did get Canadian visas. I think it was like 1 million at the time. Not that many actually came. I think it was 200,000, maybe even less. But a lot of them got those visas. But now it's back to the visas, the K1 for the fiancé visa. I'm not really so interested in this. I promote moving to the region, basically. Although I have had clients who came with me, partied, had the in-person experience, the Zarg experience back in the day, and actually met their wife, and it worked out. Still, Juan, who gave me the testimonial many years ago from when we went to Minsk together, he's still with his wife that he met. We went out partying. I know the mail order bride industry. Well, it's not really mail order bride. That's not fair. And we're in whatever marriage agency, Ukrainian bride business. They they love to say the clubbing girls, because when they go to the nightclub, apparently they don't get the best girls talking to them. But normal girls also go out and socialize these places. But anyways, he met his wife, and they're still married. And there was other guys who came with me who also either in long-term relationships or are married. And they moved back to their homeland with these women. So can't say it doesn't work out for everybody, but in general, I don't recommend that because you have a huge risk of monkey branching, and it's also a lot harder to meet quality women. Basically, the way it's worked out is, normally if you're doing that, we're going to be drink later, but I'm going to watch the rugby and maybe have a beer. Superstition in these parts, if you scratch your nose. That, the whole online dating thing in general, like, it's becoming less and less attractive to use online dating. I basically tell my clients not to use it anymore. The lowest rung in the ladder is marriage agencies or matchmaking. That's where the lowest quality women are going to be in terms of their value on the dating market, because you have to be pretty desperate to go to them. So they could be a green card girl where the main priority is immigration. They have to be open to immigration. That's basically why go to this international matchmakers unless you want to emigrate. That's the main priority. And then, the women have very few options. So that's the lowest rung of the ladder. After that, you have Tinder or whatever, or Bumble, these things. I think they were fine 10 years ago, maybe up to about 5 years ago when with my clients. But now it's like, one of my clients had success in Lithuania with a girl he met on Tinder. It already has finished his relationship. But anyways, he did meet her, so I have to say that. But I remember I had one of my clients, he appeared in my videos probably a year ago, and he said even that, he used it everywhere and with a lot of success. But he said, the beauty, if we take beauty of the women, that he could meet just going to a cocktail bar versus, you don't have to go clubbing to 4 in the morning. You don't even need to drink alcohol, right? A lot of these excuses, oh, you can't talk nightclub, well, then just go to cocktail bars. You can talk at cocktail bars, somewhere where you can socialize. Better to go to events, high level events, but you need to have a reason to be there. So yeah, as a tourist, it's going to be pretty hard to do that. But this client of mine, he said, like, the gap between the beauty level of the girls we just meet if we just go to the cocktail bar versus what he sees on Tinder, it's like at least 2 points. And that's actually statistically the situation in the US. I made a video back in the channel last year about, there's research showing that in the US, that the women that are men, even from women's point of view, meeting men, that online is 2 points out of 10 lower in terms of desirability than meeting in real life. So basically, you should move here to the region don't say it has to be all year. You could come for a few months. And ironically, the owners of the 2 marriage agencies that I reacted to, they have the Ukrainian bride business, traditional brides, blah, blah, blah. They met I'm not sure if one of them is married to his significant other. They seem to be together for years. They live together abroad in Western Europe. And the other guy is married because he says it openly on his channel. And he shows pictures of his wedding. They both failed with the matchmaking. Failed. More than one matchmaker in Ukraine. Spent, who knows, tens of thousands of dollars between them, euros. And they met their significant others by living in Ukraine and being business owners, because they started their own matchmaking services. So that's the real key. Be a business owner in the region. I'm not saying you necessarily have to go to Ukraine at the moment. And this whole traditional bride thing, I mean, it's basically pro-Russian values at this stage. So I don't know. They're still using the branding Ukrainian brides, but it just seems completely incompatible to me that they can be getting these guys who are nearly always going to be pro-Russian. Not every single one, of course, but that's just the tendency, it seems, to marry Ukrainian women and emigrate to the US. It's just, Anyways, let me go back to talking about what the comment was. I always go on that little tangent, since I know a lot of you are interested in that still. I see the views on the last the one live stream I did on that, and the videos on the views on the video I did with Yelena. I normally do one a year. We might do another video pretty soon. We discussed it. There's actually a playlist down below if you're interested in that whole scene with the Ukrainian bride business. I have a playlist down below in the video description. Go watch my content on it there, and you can watch me talk about it for hours, I think, and get all my insights. So that's down below. Let me go to the next comment, or maybe finish up. Yeah, so if you go there, I think if your only interest in Ukraine is dating Ukrainian women, just go to Poland. There are lots of Ukrainian women, plus there are Belarusians there, and you don't need to risk getting killed in a Russian rocket attack or a drone attack, because I had 2 close calls personally. The debris fell in the building in front of mine in Odessa. Fortunately, it was only been built, the building, so no one was killed or injured. They just repaired it. And then another time when I was out jogging, I turned left, and equidistant, if I turned right, they actually dropped cluster munitions, and they killed, there's like 5 or 6 people injured, 20 killed a dog as well who was out being walked. So horrific. If you're only interested in meeting women, like, why the hell are you going into a country at war? Where it'd be easier to meet women in Poland, in general, I think, than coming to Ukraine. But if you are interested in helping Ukraine, even if you're just spending your money and documenting it on your Instagram or something, then if you're hanging out there, you probably do pretty well at the moment. I would have said, especially if you're American before, but maybe Trump is going to spoil your reputation pretty badly in the next few months, maybe everywhere in Europe. So we'll have to see. But I guess if you're not pro-Russian MAGA, I'm going to maybe use that phrase, pro-Russian MAGA, not to say everybody who voted for Donald Trump is in that part of the MAGA movement. But it seems unfortunately, a lot of the personalities promoting it, like Elon Musk, are. So very disappointing, considering I watched a lot of these people 5 years ago and would have been maybe not a fan, but thought positively about them. See the way they turned on us. It feels like a big betrayal overall. So Let me go next comment. Mirror Industries. I think the war will likely end this year, and it's laughing. U.S. congressmen, their lobbyists want Ukraine's minerals. Either the U.S. gets it by China, by Russia, that's good. Or China gets. Oh, you're saying China. That's the thing. Like, Ukraine could offer those minerals. Say the U.S. says, "Well, just give it, and we're not going to give anything in return." Well, that's not a deal any sane leader is going to sign, right? But he could offer them to China, or he could offer them to the Europeans. Say, "Hey, I'll give you the deal on the mineral rights, but it's mainly the ones under Russian occupation." That's the big incentive, right? That's the smart thing. Like, it's in the U.S.'s strategic interest, as long as you assume they're still allied with Europe and the West and believe in promoting, believe in being allied with democracies, because normally in democracies we have a lot in common, we do a lot of trade together, and ultimately we kind of support each other in general, and we don't go to war with each other. So that's the thing. If you believe that's the model, then they should be backing Ukraine regardless, because at the end of the war they're going to get all these great business deals, the U.S. companies, without having to destroy the U.S.'s reputation and cost the U.S. trillions in future deals because they look unreliable, right? This is stupid. It's like short-term political gain domestically he seems to be going for, or maybe some cronies are going to make some money in the short run strip mining parts of Ukraine. I don't know what the thought process is there, but it's definitely not in the U.S. long-term interest. And Ukraine and the other Europeans can go and, as I said, balance more with China. Maybe like this whole idea of negotiating in Saudi Arabia with Russia by the U.S. to end the war in Ukraine is a bit like Ukrainians heading off to, I don't know, South Korea to negotiate with the Chinese to get the Russians to surrender. I mean, maybe that's what maybe the Ukrainians will make those overtures. Anyways, the war will not end. That is almost certain, unless there's some collapse by either side, economically or militarily. But there could be a ceasefire. That's what I agree with. But then if there's a ceasefire, the U.S. wants to be there with troops to protect while they strip mine all the resources out. I just don't think the Ukrainians are going to agree to it. And they have other options, and they're not, they need the U.S. to win quickly, but they can still win in the long term without the U.S. But of course, it's not a great situation. But they have some leverage, and Trump has overplayed his hand. He's a terrible negotiator. Why? So he's a marketing phenomenon. I give him that. Marketing phenomenon. It's complete marketing. And a lot of his supporters, because they write to me, they seem to respond to this. They think they're getting all these great deals. He would have gotten all those deals without upsetting the Canadians and threatening tariffs. They'd already agreed to him. He wasn't able to get anything really additional, and you have to weigh up ruining your reputation and forcing other countries to look for other options and how much that costs the country in the medium to long term versus the short-term gain of getting something very minor to boast about in the short term. Like, it's not good policy making. Anyways, I'll go back to reading the comments. Canada will never be the first state. Exactly. The Canadians are booing the U.S. national anthem. There's all this enmity now between Canada, and a lot of Canadians have told me, like, it's just, for what? It's Canada. How did you manage to upset all the Canadians? It's mad. And it doesn't bring any benefit to the U.S. Canada will now look, okay, we can't really trust the U.S. Maybe we need to look at China and the EU as better partners to balance them. Like, this is not good for the U.S., any of it. And especially from Canada, they didn't get anything additional from this behavior. And fentanyl, almost none of it is smuggled through Canada anyways. So Mark Britton said the art of getting out of the deal. Well, the art of appeasement is a better title for what he's doing now. Anthony says, yeah, but kind of we knew the day would happen. That was my fear when he was elected. We did wait to see what he would do, and then he kind of lured us into false insecurity with these more positive comments about Ukraine up until about 3 weeks ago, and then suddenly they started talking about they wanted elections, and Zelensky had to kind of go. So already I kind of sussed that he was going to turn on Ukraine. It didn't actually, they would so dramatically turn against the rest of Europe, but ultimately this pro-Russian MAGA strain seems to be very anti-European. They seem to believe they have more in common with dictatorial fascist Russia, which is a revanchist empire, than they do with Europeans. And we've had all that rhetoric from Donald Trump about taking Greenland and Canada and Panama Canal, which is, it's expansionist imperialist. So maybe the Trump administration is more in common with with the Putin regime and the Russian government, current Russian government, than they do with Europeans. That's unfortunately maybe a possibility. Anyways, a comment in French, il y a une opportunité de paix, il faut la saisir après la perte de 25% de territory. It's not 25% of Ukrainian territory, it's about 17, just to correct that. And why would they need to basically sign a capitulation deal when they haven't been defeated? That's just madness. Opportunity for peace is that Russia leaves. Like, Russia can leave at any point. Russia could also hold real elections. Donald Trump doesn't seem to think that's a necessity for Russia, though. Curious. And he should insist Russia just leaves. Then there's no war. Right? That's the simplest way, but Russia doesn't want to, and it will not do so until it is defeated either militarily or economically. They face some sort of collapse that then will transform Russian society, probably lead to further decolonization of the country. Don says, what do you think about the 3 red heifers in Israel and the 3/3? I don't really follow what happens in Israel and the Gaza Strip that much, other than Trump seems to want to develop it and ethnic cleanse it. Yeah, another mad idea there. That satellite ends the war. I'm not sure. Is that connected? Expat Unchained says, hello, Connor. Good to see you again. Still looking to 4 language classes with you during the summer. Yes, we will have the Ukrainian program that many of you guys invested in. Can't give you an exact date, but my English teacher has come back and said she will make it now. I couldn't find anyone else as a substitute. So unfortunately, it was massively delayed, but it will happen. I am optimistic before the summer, so sometime in the spring. But I will send an email when I see some progress on it, and I can give you a time that it will be launched. Silver King, UK Able, says he'll be in Prague again in the middle of the year. Sounds good. Send me some comments about how you find it there. Fat J says, hi, can you please explain why so many people don't want this war to end? Why are so many people making money? Like the war ending, it depends how it ends. Like if it ends in the capitulation of Ukraine and occupation and further mass murder of Ukrainians and destruction of their culture and their country, why would they be in favor of it? If that means Russia leaving Ukraine and leaving us alone, then Ukrainians are definitely going to be in favor. So, yeah, there's a small group of people who make money out of the war. Obviously, if you're supplying weapons on either side, you're making money out of the war. Or if you're a Russian soldier, apparently you're making money out of the war but probably with a low life expectancy. To a certain extent, the same on the Ukrainian side. But there aren't a huge number of people making money out of the war. It's like what kind of society do we want to live in Europe and globally? That's why, people want a favorable outcome in the war, whether they're pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian. And we're at an impasse. That's why there hasn't been a peace, and that's why a long-term peace deal is like a pipe dream at the moment, unless that dynamic changes. Steven says, hey, Steve. Hey, Connor, just returned from Moldova and Warsaw. I'm back in America and ready to travel again in April. I understand what you're saying. Cool. Let me know how things go. Always good to hear from you. You were a consulting client back many years ago. You were the first person to tell me about the Polish loophole, as I call it, where, with this correspondence between diplomats, Americans can stay in Poland 90 days, visa-free, every time they enter. But that might change this year. We'll have to see. Okay, tennis spots say, if you were so knowledgeable about this, why don't you go on a debate where you're like, I would definitely go on a debate with Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is definitely not going to debate me because he is a lying chicken shit, basically. I made reaction to videos to him at the beginning of this invasion, calling him out. The guy said he would eat his tie if the Ukrainians were resisting after, 10 days somewhere in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The Russians, after 3 years, have not even reached Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Has he ever eaten his tie? No. Has he stopped lying about what's going on? Because he can't be that bad at predicting. He's just a propaganda piece. He goes to Russia all the time. He's also got convictions for stuff to do with trying to solicit children online. He's a disgusting individual on just about every level. And but I would debate him if he wants to debate. So why wouldn't I debate him? He's wrong all the time. Be the easiest guy to say, hey, let's look at your record. Wrong. Why you keep making stuff up, Scott? What do the Russians have in you? since you have these convictions for these offenses. Yeah, but then he's paraded on for the pro-Russians. They don't care about the fact that he has these convictions for dodgy stuff with children, and that he's wrong all the time. They don't care. On the important stuff. Fat Jay says, yes, of course, none of these crooks want the word in because, yeah, whatever. It's just a dumb comment, in my opinion. Draga says, Russia actually did. They got UK out of the EU. They took over Hungary, Austria, and now they're trying to make it Romania. Yes, Kalin Georgescu is a pro-Kremlin candidate in Romania. And apparently he's been backed by J.D. Vance, MAGA in general. Pro-Russian MAGA loves it. Openly pro-Kremlin. So what side are you on, America? You know, you need to wake up if you don't support Russian imperialism and fascism, because that's where, that's the direction you're going. Tennis spot, Fat Chase, it seems like people like Jake Paul are not going to have any content anymore. Mere war industry. What is the best way to donate to Ukrainian military? Is a drone? Crowdfunding sites is directly National Bank of Ukraine. I would encourage you to donate to people that you have some contact with. There's actually a group out of here run by NAFO that supplies SUVs out of the Baltics, for example. Yeah, one that you can have some contact and be sure the money's actually been spent legitimately to help Ukraine and not been siphoned off by someone who's dodgy. Tense, but if Russia wanted, it would have wiped the entire Ukraine map, but it has an idea. That's why they were always referred to special. These are, I don't know, my channel is so small and so irrelevant to do they actually send these trolls on purpose to come and write dumb comments? Like, does it matter? Russia wanted to occupy Ukraine and install a puppet government. They failed. They don't have the capacity, short of using nuclear weapons, to actually destroy Ukraine from that far away. They've committed tens of thousands of war crimes. It's a war. Only a low IQ Muppet would keep calling it a special operation. Someone has to live in Russia and is scared to say it's a war because they get carted away. Fat J's, I haven't heard of him, but I'm searching. Okay, I haven't understood the hate Russia has against the West. It's probably just jealousy. Yeah, most of Russia is a dump. Let's be frank about it. Those pro-Russian foreigners who live there and they show you the nice parts, yeah, they will probably get arrested if they're showing you what a dump it is. I mean, they kicked out Baldwin Bankrupt. As much as I criticized Ben Rich, he was showing the crappy sides of Russia. And that's most of the country, let's be frank about it. So outside of a few select parts of Russia, it's like the same economic development as Africa. Not to talk down about Africa, but it ain't the European Union, it ain't North America. St. Petersburg and Moscow, for the most part, look nice. But outside of that, like, you just have to look, the city that was the second biggest city in Finland that was occupied after World War II or during World War II with the Winter War was Vyborg in Russian, but it was Viipuri, I think, in Finnish. Look at that compared to a normal Finnish city today, with all that beautiful architecture. It's a dump. It's a dump. They can't, and that's even in a more affable part, a more wealthy part of Russia. I mean to say, affluent part of Russia. Most of Russia's, if not third world, it's second world. So all they can do, that's why it's such a terrible, unattractive model for Ukrainians. Like, why would Ukrainians want to be poor? They hung out with the Russians. Their elite didn't insist on joining NATO or the European Union back in the 90s. And look how they got punished. They got punished with poverty for hanging out with the Russians and war. So yeah, the Poles in the 3 Baltic states, they made the right call. They have living standards multiples higher than Russia at this point. And, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, the wealthy areas is fine. They strip mine the country, basically. They take the resources from the huge, vast wilderness of Russia and funnel it to them. But most of the country is a dump, basically. Tennis spots, not use online anymore. A huge percentage of men don't have the balls to go in and approach a woman like they and most men I talk to are having success on. What's the man to do? Yeah, you meeting people in person, if you go to the right places, you're well calibrated, you know what you're doing, you're reasonably well put together guy with, you're not living below the poverty line, you're not disheveled, you don't have some deformity. You will, in this era where most men are pussies and they're using the online, they don't go over and approach women in a good way in person, you're going to clean up. Versus using online dating. Tennis spot. I don't encourage the day game drifter weirdos because that's just odd walking around the street. But in places where it's normal to socialize, yeah, it's going to work out pretty well. Sitting in the cafe, very fine. I always say, I encourage you to talk to strangers, do, I guess, cold approach, but don't be walking around like a weirdo for 8 hours outside the shopping mall, at the train station in Warsaw. You're basically a public nuisance and low value if you're doing that. And yeah, that's my take on it. Lots of quality women in agencies and matchmaking, if you know with the ropes. What do you man, listen, it's fine if you're looking for a single mom over 40 and you have no options back home. Well, that's basically the default. Then I guess matchmakers are maybe a good investment for you. You can watch again my playlist with, I make the reaction videos to them and also have some interviews with Yelena. Lots of content, go check it out. But if you want a woman under 30 who's attractive, no kids, and not insane or have some psychological problems, don't go to matchmaker and probably don't use online dating. Come in person, set up your lifestyle to meet fantastic, educated women in person. You notice why I didn't say the traditional trope because, I don't know what traditional is supposed to mean anymore because apparently I even watched one of the matchmakers saying, it doesn't mean cooking and cleaning. It's like, then basically they're just a little less emancipated than in Western Europe. I think you have in the core Anglosphere some radical feminism, which is still a minority of women with the blue hair or whatever, that they have the purple hair or whatever. Some of them are pretty unattractive to most men. That's true. There's even statistical data to back that up. But the rest of Europe, it's a minority. It's a tiny minority of women are like that. So you can meet the normal women just by socializing, being normal, having interests. It's actually become as a replacement, I see, for online dating. A lot is actually going on these run groups and stuff like that. That's where people, common interests is how people are meeting. But the lowest of the low is like marriage agencies. But for some guys, that's still their best option. Not saying it can't work for no one, but it's really, really not going to be high level. That's just the reality. Maybe in the 90s, maybe in the 2000s, it was still like a way to meet a high value woman, but no. That is not 2025. And online dating in general it's disappearing. Online is pounds compared to regular stuff. What's the best city to move to in Poland other than Warsaw? It depends. Book a consulting call because it depends on who you are. Could be Gdansk, could be Wrocław, could be Krakow. Poland better than Czechia. Depends what you're looking for. It's a little bit more bohemian in Prague, from what I believe. Heard two students when cheapest airfare was Gdansk, even so must have been 3 days. Yeah, you got the Tri-City area, you got Sopot, and you got Gdynia as well there. But yeah, maybe I'm going to go back sometime this summer and check it out and document it for you guys. I will have new videos on the channel. I have the video from Moldova earlier this week. Go check that one out if you haven't seen it. It's the last video on the channel. I will have a video about why passport bros shouldn't come to the Poland and the Baltics, because I think they don't fit in here. It's not super cheap. The women are not desperate. And now most of these passport bros in general, I'd actually shot this last summer, but I made the comment about they don't really have political beliefs or values that gel with most of the people here. And now with this whole thing with Trump and MAGA, the pro-Russian MAGA, right? They're going to be even more fish out of water in values, I think, with people here. So I'm just going to point that out. It's one video, and I'll have a few more. I'll have one about Schengen area and another one about Connor's Law, why you need to learn local languages in this region to be successful. It's going to increase the probability of being successful quite a lot. Adam says Ukraine must now rely on UK and Germany. Yes, they will have to rely on different allies. That's really soon. Everyone benefits from peace. A lot of deleted comments. Will Ukraine have elections? We'll have elections when martial law is lifted. But at the moment, Zelensky's going to win a free and fair election in a landslide. He'd probably win with more of the vote than he did when he defeated Poroshenko, which was about 75%. His approval rating was already over 50%. And now Trump has made him even more popular with this spot. So at the moment, I even saw opinion poll has gone up, I think, almost 10 points, his approval rating. Since that, he is probably going to be, approval rating is going to be soon over 70% if this spot continues, because there's a rally around the leader effect. Because now they feel like, I heard a lot of comments from Ukrainians like, Americans are just as bad as Russians. That was a comment I heard. They were talking about the US leadership. It's just as bad as Russian, like they're the same. They just want to steal our resources. So it's pretty bad. And the effect is that Zelensky's going to be a lot more popular. Zelensky said he won't run against him. Poroshenko's not going to run him. There's not going to be a credible candidate who's going to even run against him, I think. They might have Arostovich, who's basically irrelevant domestically in Ukraine because he still even uses Russian. So he's unelectable, basically. And he's been paraded out on podcasts with the MAGA bros to introduce him, which is a bit suspicious, that maybe he's a candidate US and Russia want to back. But if we have a free and fair election, Zelensky's going to win in a landslide. Unless someone like Zelensky ran against him, but Zelensky said he won't because it would be cause disunity at a time of war. So if Zelensky wanted to have a mandate for another 5 years, or is it 5 or 4 years? I think it's 5 years for the presidency in Ukraine. He would just have the election in these circumstances, which would be completely illegitimate because there's martial law and, well, he can't have them. But, if you found a workaround, held it, he inspired, and he'd win with a landslide and be there for another 5 years. And then if the war ended, you wouldn't be able to get rid of him then for years. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense, this talking point, unless they really want to get rid of Zelensky and not have a free and fair election. That's the way I see it. Yeah. But practically, you shouldn't have one. And there isn't big support to even have an election in Ukraine at the moment. UK passport now superstar in New Europe. Yeah, coming back even after the whole shenanigans with Brexit. But now, Brits going to be stepping up to the plate. Maybe within 10 years, the UK will rejoin the EU, but you'll have lost all the UK will have lost those benefits that Margaret Thatcher negotiated, those opt-outs. They won't probably have those, but that's also possible. Because the idea of being in an alliance with the US under Donald Trump, it's like mad. Like he's ruined that idea. It didn't even work out in the interim since Brexit, but now, yeah, they want a trade deal with the US? The US is not reliable under Donald Trump. You can't believe anything they're going to say at this point. They're trying to extort their allies. Don says Russia should leave like they did in Afghanistan. What's it going to take? It's going to take it's probably unlikely. And Zelensky said this before he left as commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Now he's the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom. That basically it's an impasse. It would take a significant technological advance to break that impasse. But it could also be an economic collapse in Russia. That could also... they're going to be under a lot of economic pressure this year. They're going to have a lot of problems as war goes on. I still think, just if you come late, that there won't even be a ceasefire. I think 30 or 40% likely to be a ceasefire. A long-term peace agreement in 2025, I'd say less than 5%. The underlying reasons are not addressed. Looking at it right now, of course, if there's an economic collapse or military or economic in Russia or Ukraine in the interim, then that changes the whole dynamics. Adam says, what is it like if Lindbergh was elected in 1940? What would the outcome of World War II do? Yeah, he was in America first, wanted appeasement of Hitler, and then Pearl Harbor happened, and then he changed his tune. Expat and Chase said, don't just retire in person experience in the next 5-10 years, because when I'm coming there, I'll have to make a hard call. Okay, well, come now. I don't know, because I don't recognize the handle. Have you applied for the experience? I should have applied for the experience when I was there 5 years ago, but I had a learning experience instead. Well, just apply so I know who you are, and maybe there's some way we can collaborate on something, or I can help you in some way. Steve says, Krim restaurant, Ukraine restaurant is open in Warsaw. Oh, that's great news. Love Krim. Purposely directed across from the... Oh, yes, I've been to that one. It's one across from the Russian embassy in Warsaw. Yeah, I've been there. Traditional women are what you think that is, then it's not a set type of woman. Yeah, I just think it's not a very clear term. People seem to just interpret it in mad ways, in my opinion. And I wouldn't call women in Ukraine or in this region traditional. I mean, what? They're not. It's not Afghanistan here. They're a bit less financially emancipated, so they would prefer the man takes care of the money and the career side, and that they prioritize the family. That's definitely a lot more common. It's not every Ukrainian woman either, but that's more common than, say, definitely in the core Anglosphere. So if you're looking for that, then yeah, that can be a possibility. But if you're a pro-Russian MAGA, your option is going to be slim in this region. Wow, how many? Putin's approval rate in Ukraine is less than 1%. I'd say in Poland, it's probably, well, it's got to be less than 10%. Look for Poland. I'd say Donald Trump's and the U.S. government's leadership's approval in Poland, the Baltics, it's going to be less than 50% of the next opinion polls after what he's done. And the image of America is pretty positive in these countries. It didn't mean you could just show up with your passport as America. They met lots of American guys, but now with Trump behaving the way he has, it's going to be hard. Yeah. Anyways, I saw a silver blue hair punching him with a random dude. She was American. Yeah. Mark says, "Hey Connor, thanks for having a well-balanced opinion. I appreciate these videos." Cool. Again, there's a link to the Geopolitical channel down below. Expansion. Oh, he hired me as a consultant in 2019/2020. He helped me find a dentist in Odessa. Ah, yes, this is Luke. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, we already chatted. Yeah, so I know you are now. Mark says, I never hear much about Slovakia. What is it? I find Bratislava one of the most boring capital cities in Central Europe. So yeah, I'm just not a big fan. But yeah, Slovaks, it's fine. There's nothing bad about it. Girls are pretty. I think in general, they're always friendly to me. Same in Czechia. Yeah, it's just like I'm stretched a bit thin. Like you can either go more in depth. Now I understand Estonia and the Baltics so much better than even 6 months ago. The differences between them, made so many contacts here, set up for the lifestyle, parties, just where to go socialize, eat. Yeah, then what? I only have a limited amount of time. I need to go back to Ukraine. I need to go back to Moldova. We'll go to Kazakhstan. To go then explore Czechia and Slovakia. And when do I get the time and really do it properly and spend the time and figure it out to then help clients? Yeah, Prague. I just don't think Bratislava is worth it. Adam says, is Zelensky willing to give up presidency in exchange for Ukraine and NATO? Well, there you go. That's a way for him to, if we're in NATO, and Zelensky will have an election, not run for the presidency, and allow, I guess, Solution to become president. Okay. Brandon says he took one of it. Oh, yes, you were on maybe the first one, which was Slavic Scambuster Secrets. Yeah. I remember now. Brandy's become a supporter. You can buy me a coffee, cappuccino for Connor, by going to the channel page, and I don't know what it's like $3 a month or something. I never put those tiers. I have my own programs. But thanks to everybody, obviously, super likes, super chance, or sends a donation to my PayPal. My PayPal is connorklein@sarexperience.com. It's the email address that's down below in the description. If anyone feels like doing that, always appreciate the support for this more geopolitical related content, obviously. Chat filter here is brutal. Okay. One of my video editors is ill. He tells me it's a virus, so I'm going to reassign his task. At a TRT clinic in Ukraine. That I've never been asked about. Guess Google it. Or I'll look. Anyways, if you're interested in coming to Ukraine, I don't know who this person is. Miwar Industries, write me a message, write me an email. Maybe I can help you in some way. So guys, I've been on for 90 minutes. I catch the end of rugby just about, I think. Maybe it's already over. I watched the highlights, but it was France-Italy, so I'm not too bothered. And I'm going to hit the gym. Yeah, my gym is open still because I have access to a second gym. So I can go to the second one. Final questions, final thoughts. Will there be peace in Ukraine in 2025? That was the title of today's video. I did think when I made this one, I'd already be back in Ukraine, but now since I have clients coming here, I'm going to stay on a little bit more in the Baltic states, in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And yeah, my impression, my prediction is that we will not have long-term peace in 2025 in Ukraine unless the dynamics change, military, economic, that one side really faces a huge collapse or the other. Ceasefire is possible, but I put it at less than 50%. I just think it will drag on. if Trump is going to negotiate as a pro-Russian, then what? Ukraine and the European allies of the US will look for alternatives. They will look for their own resources to back Ukraine and maybe make overtures to China, balance the US that way, which is not my preference, but just like it's the geopolitical reality. If the US is going to be this hostile to its allies, then yeah, that's kind of the result, unfortunately. And but there still is a possibility of a ceasefire. Maybe something get negotiated. Lots of ideas been thrown out. But why would Russia agree to a ceasefire? Like what's been reported as the headline there in the chat, that Zelensky would give up the presidency if Ukraine admits to NATO. Then why would Russia agree to that? They're going to be like, no, we still think we can win the war, so we're not going to agree to that. Then we couldn't attack the rest of Ukraine. That's the whole point. They want to end Ukrainian independence, and they just wrecked most of the territory that they've occupied in the last 3 years that they still hold on to. So what, they're going to rebuild all that, repopulate? It's like a huge net loss for them, even if they loot a lot of the resources. Yeah, probably wouldn't even pay for it. Who knows how many the value of the resources there and how much it would cost to extract them. So there might be trillions down there, but it might cost you trillions to get it out of the ground as well. So yeah, it's not clear to me. I just don't think, I think that there might be a way to arrange a ceasefire, but it will just be because both sides calculate they could rearm quicker. And why else? The underlying problem hasn't been resolved. Either Ukraine collapses and the rest of the West abandons it to be occupied and destroyed by Russia and recolonized, or Russia loses and probably reforms and probably decolonizes itself further, and Ukraine will probably regain all its territories in that scenario over the medium term. So that's the way I see it. If you are planning to come to Ukraine, I will be going back there. I will have a client who will come to Odessa with me, in principle. This is not 100% certain, it's probably 70%. He will be a new client. We'll go to Moldova and then to Odessa. And that would be the first client I would have in person for Odessa since 2019. It seems mad. Even when we had COVID and the lockdowns, I started clients coming back in person towards the end of that, just before the invasion. But we went to Kharkiv. And yeah, the last clients I had in Belarus was end of 2019. Yeah, who knows if we'll ever go back to Belarus again, never mind Russia. And yeah, since then I've been bringing clients to me in person to Moldova, to Chisinau, to Almaty in Kazakhstan. I'm going to be bringing clients also to Astana, to Warsaw in Poland, to Vilnius and Kaunas. We went to in Lithuania, to Riga in Latvia, and here Tallinn in Estonia. Maybe I will bring clients to Bucharest in Romania and to Prague in Czechia at some point. I'm not really thinking of any other cities other than Gdansk, maybe. So write me if you're interested in that. I would do an exploratory mission out to Gdansk to document it. And there will be lots of great content coming here on this lifestyle channel. As I said, I outlined some of the videos. I will have kind of more vlog style showing the lifestyle here from Riga in winter, Vilnius in Riga, and Tallinn in winter, probably all coming in the next 2 months, but I will film for them first. So yeah, the Geopolitics channel is down below. Subscribe to that if you want to go into more detail, because I will try to keep this almost entirely lifestyle and put all that stuff about the geopolitics onto the other channel. Then yeah, it's kind of a different audience, I feel, in general, even if there's an overlap. And yeah, thanks to everybody who supported the channel in some way with donations or buying the guidebook or reserving a consulting call, living the in-person experience, the New Europe experience with me. And back in the day, the Zara experience, and well, maybe some of the online programs like Brandon did. So yeah, if you're interested in that good stuff, I guess write me a message or reserve a consulting call down below in the video description. And I will sign off here unless there's something else. Just people saying thanks. Thanks to everybody who showed up, participated in this live stream, and drop your comments down below. Let me know how you feel about everything, what's been going on, and see you in the next video. And yeah, Inner Circle, I will be launching this community pretty soon. So yeah, just teasing it out right now. That will probably be the next live stream. До побачення, слава Україні, до перемоги, and maybe see you all soon from Ukraine itself.